Welcome to Health and Wellness with Dr. Ed. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and as always, we focus on health and wellness, hoping to empower you to have a better and healthier life. Our guest today is my good friend, Dr. Gary Fieber. Gary,
pleasure, sir.
Thank you so much for coming on. How have you been?
Doing well.
Good.
Healthy.
Healthy?
No issues.
What's the reason for that?
I live right, I eat right.
And sleep right, I'm sure.
And sleep right, and I focus on not getting involved with all the psychological trauma that goes on the planet right now.
So Dr. Fieber is a doctor of chiropractic care and has had a tremendous career starting in the wonderful state of
Minnesota.
Minnesota. You know, when I lived in Arizona, we'd get a lot of those snowbirders from Minnesota.
That's correct.
And it's a little different lifestyle over in Minnesota because you generally have harsher changes in weather, plus you're more of a rural state. So how did that impact you in your life?
Well, the interesting thing about rural state, the Twin Cities, there's about almost 2 million people now in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the 7-tier suburbs. But you're right, it is a rural state. But we could go from 25 to 30 below in the wintertime, temperature-wise in the Twin Cities, nothing to have an 85 below wind chill, to, you know, mainly 90s, 80s in the summer, but it could go to 100 degrees plus. So that dramatic change, people get hardier. They either pass or they move to a different state. But in studies that have been done, Minnesota...
Or run to Arizona in the winter.
Of course,
yeah.
Or Florida. But Minnesotans actually have a longer lifespan than most people in the country. And it's interesting because they're hardier. I mean, those are Scandinavian people. They're just tougher. Growing up, I'd walk to the bus, you know. That's probably why I didn't have any hair now because I didn't wear a cap. But we'd stand there and freeze, whatever. And it was accepted because we grew up with it. It's not like it is today. So I really go by a meeting of mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter because of the psychological component of it. And a lot of people, I think, have forgotten that. But that's a lot about what I do in holistic healthcare.
So you focus your career, now you're not in active practice as a
not
chiropractor
anymore.
now, but I know you do a lot of consulting, and you
Correct.
consult with physicians, you consult with chiropractors, physical therapists.
Yes.
I know you do this gambit of work and helping them, educate them so that they can perform better in the services for their patients. But you have a different philosophy. Gary and I talk quite often. He's often a guest on my radio show, Health and Wellness with Dr. Ed, on 12:50 a.m. I'll throw in a little plug there every Saturday morning at 9. And we really get into some heavy conversations. And we talk a lot about energy. So energy is probably the basis of everything. I think even this tabletop over here has energy, a different type of energy than we have. But what do we need to do to support that energy? And I guess that energy is actually what is our physical being, emotionally, physically, as well as our immune system. What does all that entail? And I know that starts with the constant flow of energy with our body in alignment.
Absolutely. Well, this table has a frequency to it. It's a base frequency, but every cell in our body, roughly 40 trillion, depending on who you believe, actually has a positive and negative charge to it. Why do we conduct electricity and get electric shocks when we walk across carpet?
And
Go ahead,
we
do
banter
this all the time.
That you say we have that negative and positive charge because, and you mentioned the word cell, but every cell is actually a little individual battery.
That's right. It is a little individual battery, and they communicate with the other ones. And you have to understand that these cells are reproducing, dying, or being altered simultaneously. We figure we lose 1 million cells a minute, but we reproduce the same number, or we wouldn't continue to live. So what happens is, just like trying to tune, if you walked up to these smart TVs and put a magnet next to it, you'd pull the image right off the screen. Mm-hmm. Everything is electronic. Frequencies. There was a sunspot storm the other day, and people heard weird noises, their lights dimmed, their cell phones didn't work. This concept of electricity, people sometimes talk about spiritual energy. There's energy that flows in us and around us all the time, which is where acupuncture concept came from. And I've studied that since '78. And that's all that is balancing energy. But you got to look at the brain and the spinal cord. The brain is the master control center for the body. It's like your hard drive on a computer. The spinal cord comes off of that, and off of that goes nerves that go to every cell, every organ, every part of your body.
Otherwise, that message wouldn't get through.
That's right. Not only does it send a message to it, but that message comes back. And the brain functions at that level and makes corrections all day long, just like hormone production. Fear. When you get stressed, your immune system is compromised because some of the hormones trigger your adrenals to go into a fight or flight. The problem now, we can't fight. Some people do run away and hide. It was great in the, caveman ages.
Well, you would be eaten if you couldn't.
That's correct.
If you couldn't run or defend yourself.
That's correct. So this energy we balance in a number of ways. We balance chiropractically or structurally, and it's not just chiropractors that understand this now. If you interrupt the flow, think of your spinal segments as a bicycle chain. And if you've ever had a bicycle chain jump on the sprocket or come off, the spine moves constantly. If it starts to be altered in function, it affects the nerves that control that. If it stays there long enough, it can affect the nerves. That's why, I would see a lot of people with stomach disorders, digestive problems. A lot of times it was the spine that had actually been irritated over time. Once that gets stuck, fixated, call it whatever you want, that loop starts, and you can take all the medication you want, but if you don't fix the cause, the problem doesn't go away.
Well, that's really the basis of health and wellness with Dr. Ed, is we're always trying to look for that root cause. And I always describe the body as basically a tube. If you really think about it, we start from one neural tube and everything grows out of it. We have these undifferentiated cells we call stem cells, and then they get triggered by chemicals to change into certain cells that do certain things. And if you look at your body as a hose, garden hose, and just think of it in that simple basis there, you water your plants, and that water, which is energy, electrical potential, all of that, nutrients, everything, flowing out, the minute that hose kinks, that stops.
Right.
And so the end result is that plant doesn't get what it needs and it dies. And that's basically what happens if you're out of adjustment, or what's the medical term for that?
Well, they call it subluxation. Most people don't understand that. The common term is, well, my back's out of place. Well, no, it's not really out of place, because if it was, it would be somewhere else. But imagine things just like a bicycle chain. Those links all have to move uniformly. Those joints get stuck. And what we really do is look for the main ones, and we put them back into motion. But if you don't look at other aspects, i.e., what's the muscle function of the ones that support that area? Because, I can adjust you once a week for the rest of your life, but if I don't find any underlying causes or complicating conditions that might cause that, like watch people walk. Most people walk when they fall to one side. And if you look at their shoes, one heel's worn out compared to the other. Well, I can fix them all day long, but if they don't fix the shoe, they're going to keep, it's like driving your car with the right front tire to load 10 pounds on air. It alters the function. Eventually, your body will compensate until you get about a 60% loss of this energy, and now symptoms occur.
Well, I think some people take care of their cars far better than they take care of themselves. And you can maybe blame even allopathic medicine for this. It's a reactive approach to things. It's not a proactive. Chiropractic care, dentistry are proactive.
Exactly.
You're trying to keep people from having the problem and not just trying to fix the problem. And I know you can see, and I see it all the time, somebody walking, you'll see one shoulder higher than the other, hip. They're not you should be at the same plane.
Right.
So when you see that, what does that mean to you?
There's an imbalance either from the feet up, or there could have been some trauma to the neck, the mid-back. I've even seen that with people with TMJ problems, jaw problems, and you see that a lot of times. In fact, I worked for years with a TMJ specialist in the Twin Cities, because half the people that came in with jaw problems, they didn't know they had them, but they had headaches. So we would look at them, fix any problem in the neck or anywhere else, then they would go back to the TMJ specialist. They would fix that. I still do some of that stuff, soft tissue. I do a lot of healthcare coaching for people. They call me, they want to know information. In fact, either after your radio show, we always get calls. And some of the stuff that goes on, you mentioned medicine, allopathic. I work with some great medical doctors. We work with the Twin Cities Scoliosis Center, great surgeons. The problem is most people don't do anything until they have significant pain or discomfort, or their tooth is fulminating whatever out of it, and they got to come in and go, fix this, it's killing me. Well, if you brush your teeth, if you learn how to brush your teeth properly and floss and eat right and not drink 6 quarts of Pepsi a day or Coke or anything else, the body has a chance to function at a higher level than if you continue to put bad gas in your car. It's the same thing, and we try to protect the body, but we try to project to people we work with, including doctors I work with in the field, that want to add, especially now, what can we do to help people's immune systems function? It's not just the food. It's not just, a lot of it's your mental attitude. If you sit and worry, I guarantee you're going to get sick. So there's so many different aspects of it.
Well, you're referring to stress.
Absolutely.
So why does stress cause a physical problem with inside your body?
Stress changes the number one organ in the body for that are the adrenal glands, okay? The adrenals are responsible for about 95% of all precursors. Now they work closely. The other organ is the thyroid, and you can't have one without the other. But if I get stressed, I'm going to get a reaction. In fact, ask one of the students here at the school, hey, how did you feel the last time you worried about a test you were going to take and you hadn't studied? Watch them. They tighten up. They get stressed because the body goes into a protective defensive mechanism. That is a wear and tear system if it's not handled.
Well, those adrenal glands are 2 little pea-sized organs that sit on top of your kidneys.
Correct.
And they're in a loop system with the thyroid and hypothalamus and the parathyroid and all. I don't want to get into all of that, but they're in a big loop system, and they all talk to one another. And they send something called hormones, which are the messenger systems. So they tell each other what to do, and those hormones tell the cells what to do. So when that loop is messed up, for whatever reason, and your body cannot function. But what also happens is there's a change in adrenaline, and glucose, and insulin, and all of those components can have a major impact, interesting enough, on what your brain, your heart, actually with this virus that's going around, we're finding that people that have high glucose levels are more susceptible to getting the virus.
Right.
So we're talking major implications from something as simple as, like you said, I have a test, I'm worrying about it, I'm not sleeping, all of that suppresses our immune system. So what are some of the steps that we can take to counteract that?
It's interesting, and again, we go back to your thought process or what you focus on, because what you focus on either occurs directly or there's a residual effect after the fact. You can have a problem take weeks, months, years to develop, just like your blood sugar you mentioned. If that blood sugar is elevated because you live on, Hostess cupcakes in the morning and McDonald's in the afternoon or any fast food, there's so much fat in it, there's so much chemical in it that your body has to work much harder to clear it. That's why we have such a problem with obesity in this country, because most of what we eat is the bad fat. So it gets stored. What people don't understand is this bad fat actually gets stored around the organs. The fat's there to protect it, but if you're leaching toxins into it, so now your body has to react. Eventually, it's how many times can I hit you in the shoulder lightly until you finally go, "Ow, that hurts." Well, okay, finally the body cannot sustain that action by suppressing that, call it input, stimulus, whatever you want, and now a symptom occurs. The symptoms occur to tell us there's something wrong, pay attention, wake up. Today, people who don't sleep, people who can't sleep, and I'm not talking about a good bed or a good pillow, let's assume they have it, but if you go to bed watching the news at night, is there anything positive on the news? In fact, I tell people before they go to sleep, think about something that makes them happy. Think about something that they enjoy doing. Peaceful. Where were they by the lake? And believe it or not, it calms the body down.
Do you know, interestingly enough, I didn't learn to study, probably didn't have to study all through my educational career until I got to medical school, and then suddenly I had to learn how to study. And I developed some techniques. One was never read when I was in bed, never study in bed, go to the library and study, things like that. I learned a few things even in highlighting. Some people take one color highlighter and mark, and then all of it is a yellow blur on the page. And I would use different colors according to the topic or according to the line. And it really helped me in my performance with studying. But one of the things that I learned how to do, while everybody else was staying up nights trying to study for the test at 8 o'clock in the morning, I would study till a certain time, which was probably about 9 o'clock in the evening, if that. And then I'd go to a movie the night before a test, a big test. And we had major tests like 3 times a week, at least, and minor tests in between. And I would go to a movie, and my classmates would go, there he is, off to the movies. And they're all meeting and studying and everything like that. But I learned early on that if I relaxed, I slept better, and I got up early, and I would just review my notes quickly, and I would perform on the test. Because I took that level of stress, because when that insulin goes up and that sugar level goes up and all of those adrenaline, everything that all that stress does, causes brain fog.
It does cause brain fog, and it's whenever you get stressed like that, it doesn't last that long, so you get this burst of energy. That's why people that have a strong cup of coffee or have a Mountain Dew drink or a sugar drink, Red Bull, they feel energized for what? A half hour, an hour, maybe, until their blood sugar crashes. And now they're like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? We give this artificial boost. One of the things that concerns me a great deal, and I've been dealing with it for a long time, is all of the smartphone, tablet, computer stuff. And you talk about posture, and you see these people all day long like this, and go to a restaurant. You might as well go by yourself, because whoever you're talking to has got this phone stuck in their face anyway. And the point is, one, they're bent down, by the way, which stretches the spinal cord and the attachments to the brain, which puts pressure on it. People don't think clearly. Their eyes are so close to it, but they focus on electronics. And this electronics, it's like torture in a way. After a while, they either get mesmerized by it, talk to them, they don't even hear you, or they're all agitated. That causes, the body reacts to every stimulus. In fact, if somebody dropped something in this room right now, we'd all jump, because it's that sort of subconscious awareness of what's going on. A lot of it we try to ignore, and some of us are better at it than others. The other thing, and you mentioned studying, the other thing we have to focus on is what can we prioritize that's really important to us and what isn't. Because a lot of people, and that's why I don't watch the news, I don't listen to the news, I don't read newspapers, because most of it you can't believe anyway.
True.
And their opinions. And just because I say something to you, you can either decide to react to it proactively or negatively, or you can go, that's an interesting opinion, Gary. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we always hope to inspire in our conversations.
Inspiring, yes.
So that you can investigate it. We throw out topics. We're certainly not telling anybody what to do. We never diagnose. We never treat on the radio show, this TV show. We just want to educate and inform, and I think that's what's critical. But when I don't want to beat stress up, but stress really has a bad impact. And one of my techniques is every morning, and I disconnected cable a long time ago, and I don't listen to the news. I'll listen to podcasts, and I certainly stay on top of things. I limit my sources to people that know what they're talking about, in my opinion. But in any case, a whole other topic. But I start my morning out every day with music. I set my mind so that I'm in a peaceful state, and then I'm able to function all day long. How do you handle your mornings? Because I know Gary's on the phone early day because he's consulting everywhere across the country.
You're right. It's fun when they're in California or the IMENs or somewhere else. It's really, okay, what is it? One of the things that I do is I think about what I'm grateful for. Gratitude is something we don't pay attention to. It's very hard to be grateful for something and not be happy. It really is. The other thing I do is, okay, I'm grateful for the fact that I can help these people. I've been that all my life. It's about helping people. If somebody today, one person watches this and does one thing to relax and feel better, then it's great. And if just speaking to people is like speaking to yourself. So I think of 2 or 3 things I'm grateful for, and amazingly enough, you relax. The mindset is there. You're happier. You just feel more relaxed. I also think about the people I'm going to help today. What is it I can do to make their life better? If it's one thing, whether it's when you're in practice and you're physically doing something, but maybe not half in dentistry, but a good portion of it is just the way you communicate with that patient.
No, I think it's all about communication.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's all about communication. But some people, well, that's another thing. We don't know how to communicate anymore. We talk at people.
Yeah.
We don't talk with them. And if they would teach in schools, in colleges, in life, how to listen, it would be a much better situation.
Well, I think that's always been the past. I come from a family of educators. My father was a history English teacher and then
Sure.
a principal, and I always remember him saying, "When you reach, all you need to do is reach that one person, and you've made a difference."
Right.
You know, and I think anybody who's a teacher in any school system, any college, with all this technology today, it's changing because everybody's in front of that blue screen all the time, but in every medical profession, every physician is a teacher. That's your job.
Right.
You're there to fix some problems. You're there to prevent some problems, but you're really there to educate your patients so that those problems don't come back.
And if you don't listen, you don't know what you're doing. You can't fix what you don't understand. And that's another thing that I talk about all the time is, and I've learned this over the years, I wasn't this great at this in high school, but learn to be interested, not interesting. Interesting as I'm talking about myself the whole time. Edmund, I'd like to know how you're really doing today. And pay attention. And
Dr. Fieber, I'm having more fun than a barrel of Fauci's.
there you go. I mean, it's amazing. But the point is, people don't pay attention. If you just, and the studies out there today, people are all into immediate gratification with their smartphones, their computers, everything. But the one thing they crave by survey is the human connection. Talking to someone or with someone and having somebody pay attention to them and acknowledging that, yeah, I heard you.
Which is with all this disruption with what's going on in the world today,
Oh, yeah.
is becoming non-existent. I mean, you know, social distance, wear a mask, don't hug anybody, don't go visit your family, you know, all this craziness. Anyway, Dr. Fieber, we're going to take a little break here. We're going to be back for the second portion, and we're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty of being healthy and in supporting our immune system.
Perfect.
We'll be back at Health and Wellness with Dr. Gary Fieber. Welcome back to Health and Wellness with Dr. Ed. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and we're here with Dr. Gary Fieber. And we were talking before the break about emotion, we were talking about stress, we were talking about all these things that impact the messenger system within our body. And we're really focusing today on the immune system. One of the issues, I think, and I know you're going to concur with that, Dr. Fieber, is how we treat our body, whether we're sleeping, in what position, or whether we're sitting, and you refer to that as posture. So how does posture impact our immune system?
Posture is interesting because we are built to sit up straight, to stand up straight, to be level. In fact, the best way is that when I looked at posture in people, if there was an imbalance, if you have a big enough room and I had a big enough therapy room, I'd tell them, we'd have somebody walk with them, but we'd tell them, close your eyes and take 5 steps. People with bad posture will walk in a circle or walk off to one side. Posture is a constant feedback loop to your brain. And the research has been done, indicates that bad posture, and I mean slouched, sitting, laying back, this way on your phone all day long, literally can trigger cardiac problems, bronchial problems, lungs, breathing, digestive problems, the gut's connected to everything. It can affect your immune system in a negative way because the immune system is so important in taking the feedback loop from the body, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's what we eat. And that immune system literally is fighting every negative thing that's going on.
Because you've been bombarded second by second, microseconds with polluted air, polluted food, stress chemicals made within your body. All of just the bodily functions create waste, toxicity, and stress. So you're constantly dealing with that. So basically, what I'm hearing here is, if your posture's not right, you're causing a backlog of all of this stuff.
Yeah, and it may not be symptomatic right away. I mean, I see people all the time. If you just, like the whole thing with the breathing and part of the COVID symptoms, or whether you have COVID or bronchitis or anything else, and I was talking to a lady a week ago, by the way, who called me because I was on your radio show. No plug there, just the honest truth. And they had been sick, and she was having a hard time breathing. And I did a Zoom call with her, and this woman sitting all hunched over. I said, can I ask you to do something for a minute? Would you just try to sit up straight and take a deep breath in? It was the first time she could take a deep breath in after being sick. Well, it compresses the chest, it compresses the lungs, the heart, everything else. So these studies, they actually measure this stuff. But remember, breathing is something you really need to do on a regular basis. And if this air is not filtered, if it's not clean, that puts stress on you. And stress is any abnormal stimulus that the body has to deal with.
So if you're leaning forward, you're compressing your abdominal muscles, your intercostal muscles, you're compressing your lung alveoli, everything's being compressed.
Right.
And you have a major nerve. What's that nerve called?
The vagus nerve?
Vagus nerve, the Las Vegas nerve.
That's right.
If that's compressed, then the messages aren't being sent, so these organs aren't functioning properly because they're not being told what they need to do.
And the feedback loop back to the brain, which tells them what to do, is being altered.
So we have a gut.
Correct.
It starts with this oral cavity, the sinuses, our ears, goes down our esophagus, all the way down to small and large intestine and out.
Right.
All right. So when I compress my gut, what happens?
Well, it's interesting because if you consider the stomach, that's why most people shouldn't eat. I mean, if you watch people eat, they're eating all slouched over, they're watching TV while they're doing it. Okay, you're going to affect the throat, the esophagus. That's why, notice how many people choke in positions like that. They should be upright so the food goes down the right opening and not end up in your lungs. It goes into your stomach, where your stomach, of course, well, as you know, of course, once you start to chew, you start to digest.
Once you start to smell, you
actually true.
digest. Yeah.
But you want the digestive enzymes to start. And if you're compressing your stomach, if you're compressing your colon, whether it's small or large, the body can't produce the enzymes as well. It affects the circulation to these organs, and it just slows down the function. And if you do that on a repeated basis, eventually the body will make some kind of an adaptation to it. It's going to change hormone function. It's going to change speed of reaction. And now, later on, you might develop ulcerative colitis. You might develop digestive problems in the stomach. You might develop, oh gee whiz, reflux. Reflux, a lot of times, in my experience, has been a problem with the diaphragm being way too tight because of this bad posture. So that affects the opening between the stomach and the small intestine.
And as a chiropractor, you actually have an adjustment to
Absolutely.
to correct
Yeah,
that.
and we'll teach people how to do some of that stuff, but if they just learn how to stand up. But if your spine is messed up and it doesn't move, which is why once we fix it, we try to give people exercises to maintain it. I mean, if you're all bent over and I tell you to sit up straight and you bend over and you sit up straight but you're still bent, it doesn't work. But once people understand that, they can do most of this simple stuff at home.
So this vagus nerve, if that's
Right.
severed, you're dead.
Yeah, well, actually, that comes off the mid part of the brain. That's why people in car accidents, any kind of injury to the neck or head, get nauseated, vomit, just don't feel good, because that nerve all the way down now short circuits.
And that's also, that impacts, like when you stop by a police officer for speeding and you get those butterflies in your stomach. That's all that communication there. So we know how important all of that is. And we know that the intestinal tract is they say 70% of your immune system. I would tell you it's more than that. But let's say 70% of your immune system. When we mess up our intestinal tract and we lower our immune system, we become susceptible. So how do we support our immune system?
Well, it's interesting.
Through our intestinal tract is the focus.
Exactly. If you drink water, for one thing.
Stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated. Most people are dehydrated. They just don't drink enough water. And of course, I know you've heard this before, but there's a concept of pH balanced water. It should be around the 9.5, because everything's acidic and we have to react to that. If you eat foods that are digestible and not chemicalized and processed, because if they process something, if the expiration date on the food's a year from now, do you really think you're going to process and digest that? I don't think so. No. You might as well chew on the bag it came in. In fact, they've done studies with mice, with cereal. Look at the expiration date. The mice do better on the box they eat than the cereal in it, which tells you something. And we try to deal with all. So this is a stressor to the body. So the body reacts to it. You produce a different type of chemical. You're not going to digest the food properly, so you don't burn the energy or don't create the energy you need from burning and metabolizing the food, and you don't have enough water, so your cells dehydrate. And by the way, your cells have a positive and negative charge, which we talked about, and the only way they work is to create that electric imbalance through the cell membrane. And if they don't work and you don't have enough fluid, they don't work right. So they don't reproduce, they don't stimulate the body to produce digestive enzymes. It's an ongoing loop.
So you're just giving the example of the old having to add water to your battery deal.
Exactly right.
You need water in the battery for the battery to work.
Except now, because they're sealed, they wear out faster. Yeah. Technology.
Yeah. So it's about getting oxygen and nutrients to every cell, which then sends it to every organ in order for you to function and be healthy. So somehow everybody thinks, and I don't know if the media is doing it or the medical profession is doing it or the people that sell all of this stuff is doing it, but they want you in a sterile situation. And the last thing that we are is sterile, nor should we be sterile. So when we're sterilizing our hands and sterilizing our mask, wearing these masks in an attempt to sterilize our breath, I guess, we're eating fake food, which is now a new push for no meat and fake meat and all this stuff. It's a whole like 10 shows what's behind all of that. We're really destroying our immune system by destroying the good bacteria that's in our gut.
Absolutely. People don't realize you have more bad bacteria. You have more good bacteria, which keeps you from being sick, and it overcomes the bad bacteria.
Because they're competing for the same space.
That's right. And the good bacteria has to be there to function. You know more than I do about how much normal bacteria there is in the mouth. Well, the whole body is that way. I mean, under the skin, it's the largest organ in the body, and that microbiome, they call it, which is where most of the immune system cells start their journey. And by the way, those cells and that tissue there is connected to the gut. The gut is connected to the heart. So when someone says, I don't have a good feeling about that, or my gut tells me no, listen to your gut, because the gut has over 40,000 specialized nerve cells that go right to your brain.
Well, do you know where the second brain is, Dr. Fieber?
There's 3 of them. Where's the second one?
Gut.
Yep. It's amazing.
And the gut communicates with the brain, and
Yep.
the gut communicates with the heart, and the gut communicates with your thyroid.
Oh, yeah.
Why is that important? I got to tell you, as Dr. Fieber well knows, and maybe even the audience knows, because I'm always talking about it, I have a lot of experience working with thyroid patients.
Absolutely.
And when the thyroid doesn't work, it's to me an indicator that the gut isn't working. When the gut's not working, it's an indicator that the thyroid is not working, because they communicate and talk to one another. And when that balance is off, and I think as a chiropractor, you are about balance.
Totally about balance. Whether it's organ balance, spinal balance, posture balance, it has to be balanced. Nothing works if it eventually is out of balance long enough. And if you don't fix it, it's going to stop running.
And that's basically aging and death.
Right.
So we're talking about the immune system, and we're talking about the cells being a battery. We have to know that the thyroid has to function properly, because the thyroid is the voltage regulator, what controls the voltage the energy within that cell. If your thyroid's not working, you do not have the energy to function on an organ level, on a cellular level, or on a day-to-day basis. So I think we're painting a picture here of how everything is integrated, and when you mess up here, you're going to get a result over here.
Exactly right. And the sad part of this is, and again, the capital M medical community, and I know some great physicians, are trained in such a specialized way that if you have a thyroid problem, you're going to go to that specialist. If you have a foot problem, you're going to go to that specialist. But they don't seem to, some of them do, trust me, but they're limited by reimbursement schedules. What a concept.
We call them codes.
Codes, yes. ICD-10 codes. And if you don't bill the right code, you don't get paid. And, they've done studies where how often the doctor will interrupt you because they can only spend so much time with you depending on the problem you have. And that's not good for you, and they don't like it, but they got to play the game. So my whole goal all my life, because I found structure in chiropractic when I was 8, and decided I'm just going to do this the rest of my life. And my real goal is to educate people so they understand they have a choice, and they understand if there's something just not right, find somebody that will listen. I spend a lot of my time just answering questions that I never see these people. And I'm sure you help a lot of people with things other than dental issues. But people don't take the time, they're afraid to ask because they think they're not being listened to, and a lot of times they're not. And sometimes it's so simple. And a lot of times, and you and I both know, nutritional supplements are so important today, the quality ones, because we don't get it in our food.
It's not being produced.
It's not, or it's cooked out of it.
Yeah.
It's like flour.
Well, the oral condition is the basis of your oral health. If you're
Absolutely.
in a poor state of oral condition, you're in poor health systemically. There's no question about it. Even there's a big association with the virus and your oral health. Interestingly enough, there's been not one case of transmission of this virus in a dental office due to the fact that every patient that walks in rinses with a mouthwash before they're seen. And that's nationally. So this impact that our oral cavity has is incredible. But there's this garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. So if you're taking garbage in your mouth, in your system, and you're digesting garbage, you're going to get a poor result. So we have to look at the quality of the food that we take, and it's hard to find, and it's expensive, and it's going up more and more, just like gasoline and everything else in today's world. But we have to really be selective, not only in what we put in, but what we keep out.
Well, you have to look at this from, I need to take the responsibility to read a little bit about what's in it. I mean, if I buy anything, although I know pretty much what to avoid, but I always look at the ingredient label, and it's not just the major ingredients. Look at the other things that are in it. High fructose corn syrup, all of the salts and preservatives. If those preservatives are in the food to keep it from rotting, and if you eat it, where do you think those preservatives are going to go? Oh, gee whiz. Yeah. And you look at these, a lot of people hear about oxidative stress. Oxidative stress, oxidation goes on in the body because it needs to, but the uncontrolled part of it finally causes things like arthritis, heart problems, digestive problems, oral problems.
Well, I think people hear of antioxidants.
Right.
And maybe have an understanding, although I think the two of us should talk about that. But I don't really know if people know about oxidative stress and what oxidation, and that's our normal biological process, but what that actually does if it's uncontrolled.
Well, doesn't it start with breathing? Because oxygen is obviously vitally important. Without it, that's why wearing a mask is so great, because you inhale carbon dioxide and limit the amount of oxygen, which affects your brain function, by the way. So, you wonder why students have a harder time learning, not to mention dealing with stress. Oh, well. But you're looking at an atom or a molecule that is looking for, it has an extra electron on it, and it's looking to grab something. Well, if it gets out of control, it's going to grab it from a normal molecule of something else. So if it does that, you now have some other product organ function that's going to suffer as a result.
You know, interesting enough, we keep focusing on this battery thing because
Right.
that's what we are. We're electrical energy.
Exactly.
We can test it, EEG, EKG, all these electrical things are plugged on when we were doing testing because they're measuring electrical potential. So you sit here and you breathe, and you need that breathe, but again, you need oxygen and the proper balance between carbon dioxide and oxygen.
Right.
And you know that I'm not a proponent of masks, and they do a ton of damage, including what we in the medical field are now calling mask mouth, because we see the damage that this constant
Right.
wearing of a mask does. But you get out of balance, and then you change that electrical potential. But your body, as you keep saying, and it's a wonderful theme to keep repeating, wants to stay in balance. So it's going to pull from one thing to compensate for another thing.
Survival.
You know? And so what that happens is we always, as a functioning life form, need to be in an oxidative donor state. And we end up becoming in an oxidative Steeler state.
Yeah.
Not a Pittsburgh Steelers state,
Well, that's
but
okay
a
for me.
Steelers state. And we're stealing from one thing to compensate for the other thing. And in lies the basis of inflammation, and therefore the bottom line is disease, because this is a medical term. There are two medical terms that I'm very fond of. One is if you don't use it, you lose it.
Right.
And the other is when there's stress, there's inflammation. When there's inflammation, when there's inflammation, there's disease. When there's disease, there's inflammation.
Correct.
And stress and this oxidative Steeler state puts us in this inflammatory state.
We talk about stress, but remember, physical stress exists. So if you're doing too much physical labor, if you're doing things that cause you to be in pain all the time, that's a physical stress. Your body will deal with it the same way. And then, of course, you don't feel good, so then you worry about it. And then you worry about it, and this is a downward spiral. That's why and I know this may be crude, but when you flush a toilet, the water spirals down. And that's what happens to people's health. They eventually just feel so bad, they give up, and they end up in the ER, or they go get surgery. I'm not that surgery's bad, but it's a last resort. But
Should be.
It should be a last resort. So if you can drink more water, if you can focus on being grateful, if you can focus on this, not letting everything worry you, scare you, and the media does a great job of scaring the ever-living whatever out of you.
Oh, that's how they make money.
Well,
It's
exactly.
the
And when you talk to your kids, or you talk to your friends, or your spouse, or anybody, first of all, ask them a question and let them answer. You know what, your opinion's important to me. I know how many parents spend time talking to their kids, and it's difficult because they get bombarded in certain ways with everything else. Kids have opinions. They may not agree with you, but at least you ought to know what it's about and how it affects them emotionally. It's the emotional thing that people suppress. And that suppression starts to short circuit everything that goes on in the body. Take somebody that's chronically stressed, and you will see a very physically sick individual at some point.
You know, I cancer, bad word to hear.
Right.
You have cancer, but when you really look at it, cancer is nothing more than a broken DNA bond.
Yeah.
That's what cancer is. So it becomes a malfunction of the reproduction of a cell.
Mm-hmm.
That's what cancer is. So you have to look at the causes of cancer. Everybody in the medical field wants to give it a name. Oh, you got this cancer, you got this cancer, you got this cancer. Cancer's cancer. We're being bombarded by all these stressors. If we allow them to break the bond, we potentially can get cancer. Same thing with any pathogen, whether it be bacterial pathogen or a viral pathogen or a fungal pathogen. They get out of control, we get sick. Interestingly enough, it's not the pathogen that makes you sick, it's their toxic byproducts that make you sick. So, when people talk about sterilizing their hands, I tell them that's the worst thing you can do because you have a biome in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in balance. And you want to keep the production down, and you do that by mechanical debridement. When you sterilize it, you're killing the easy things to kill. and the tough things to kill, such as a virus which isn't alive anyway, and the fungal, which is extremely difficult to dismantle, you're allowing them to overtake. So my philosophy is totally different, and I know your philosophy is pretty much on par with mine. So what are your thoughts about all of this mask wearing, all these hand sanitizers that I see, that have even alcohol, and alcohol is a toxic thing to,
Right.
rubbing alcohol, 70% isopropyl alcohol is toxic. You get absorbed right in your skin. What are your thoughts on all
Well,
that?
sadly, and you know better than I do, if you change the amount of carbon dioxide oxygen balance that you breathe in, you change the pH in the mouth, you're all of a sudden changing the biome where this bad virus bacteria can take off. And the good stuff that's there to kill it now gets suppressed. So now that starts the process. We should be washing our hands all the time to handle basic negative stuff. But if you sterilize something like you said, over-sterilize it, it's a problem. Going back to masks, I mean, I'll only wear a mask to not stress out the people that really want me to wear one, and that's okay. But if you've seen the studies, they finally even the government officials just finally said, well, those masks don't really do any good. They don't, because that virus is smaller than the droplets of moisture that we breathe out, and it goes right through.
Even the so-called N95
That's
masks.
true. And plexiglass, I just found this out, that virus can climb up over that and get to you.
Really?
Oh, it's amazing. Be careful with that stuff.
Isn't it amazing what science will tell you? I'm
sorry.
I think that people really need to start thinking for themselves, and all of this is causing people to stop the ability to reason. And you need to investigate, and don't take our word for anything.
No, just ask a question or two.
And start to look at things on your own.
Right.
So, how often should I see a chiropractor?
It depends on what you want to go for. If you have pain, there are people who go to chiropractors only because they hurt. Now, if you screw your neck up, that's a medical term for, cervical subluxation, and I put it back in motion and it functions, great. But if it keeps happening, there's an underlying problem. Maybe there's a weak muscle. Maybe you got bad posture. Maybe you walk funny. I mean, it's the same thing. If your wheel alignment's off, keep letting it be off, and you're going to wear other parts out. Go to a chiropractor, talk to him, find out what's really going on from the feet up, or are there other things? I mean, I had a huge practice, actually in women's health care, in just dealing with hormone imbalances. Because why? They're connected. But a lot of it's food. A lot of it's these hormones they give these poor people for everything else. So we got to look at the real cause and what I call the underlying complicating factors. If you ask, people will tell you, 90% of the time, a person will tell you what's causing the problem.
Yep.
You got to listen, you fix it, or if you can't, you send them to somebody who can.
Dr. Fieber, we're at the end of the show. I know that your contact information was given throughout the show, and I know you welcome anybody's questions.
Oh, absolutely. I'll help anybody that wants to listen.
Even
if they don't.
All right, thank you so much. You stay well. And you will hear Dr. Fieber on my radio show, Health and Wellness with Dr. Ed, AM 1250, every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you so much. Remember, a healthy pet is a happy pet. All of everything we talked about applies to your dog and your cat as well, and your horse for that matter.
Absolutely.
God bless. We'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.